Hey, this is Rob Anspach, and welcome back to another edition of E-Heroes for those keeping count. This is episode 336. We're going to talk about performance, realizing your potential. Whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a sports athlete, whether you're, I don't know, a hamster spinning on a wheel. That's kind of what we feel like some days. I brought on my next guest, Dr. Justin Tausig, and we're going to talk about exploring your potential. So, welcome and thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We met on LinkedIn through mutual friends, mutual friend Jonathan Thompson, and I've helped him with his books, and I know he's working on some projects for you, which we'll get into later, but it fascinates me because, I jumped on your website to learn more about you. And it's like, wow, you've got a great history and you're teaching people how to not only overcome, I guess, their fears, but be a better version of themselves.
Yeah, I try to.
You try. We
It's
gotta listen, right?
well, you got to listen, and I don't fix people. Some people come to me and they say, "Okay, these are my issues," and
Mhm.
I don't fix people. I can't pick up a wrench, open your brain, and get in there and make adjustments. It's very much a process of growth. It's a process of self exploration. Um, but it's very practical as well. It's not just some kind of amorphous, wandering through the multiverse.
Mhm. Although, that would be cool. Seeing multiple versions of yourself and seeing what they can and can't do.
Mhm.
And as an entrepreneur who's been doing this for 30 years, I've been in the trenches. I've seen people, I've seen the potential, and there's a lot of entrepreneurs that I think never get out of the way of themselves, where they come up with all these excuses why they can't do something. And if they just stop the excuses, they could get it done. You know, when I was writing my very first book back in 2013, I spent months going back and forth and what should I include and what should I not include, and I examined every single question and was like, dude, just get the damn book out. And finally I just said, with that attitude, I got the book out and people loved it. I had to get out of my own head. And I think that is probably one of the biggest reasons why I can't say entrepreneurs fail. It's just they don't excel, and then they're out of business in a very short time.
Well,
Have
I think you're touching on something really important. We human beings don't make use of the natural resources. We waste a lot of natural resources, I think. But the biggest resource I think we waste is human potential. And whether that's in business or whether that's in sports or in the arts or basically almost every area of human endeavor,
Mhm.
uh, people are in their own way. People get caught up living their life according to what they think is going to please other people, right? If you go through your whole life and you only want to make your family happy, but you're not thinking about, well, does what I want as an individual actually mesh with what my family has as an idea of what I should be doing with my life?
Mhm.
Um, or their friends, or I mean, a lot of people end up in relationships and marriages where, well, my friends really like this person, so I'm going to be with this person, or I don't want to hurt their feelings by ending this situation or walking away from this stable job that I really don't like, or it's really not fulfilling. And obviously, there are economic um, uh, realities to that too. I would say a lot of people don't end up in jobs that they find personally fulfilling.
Mhm.
Um, or financially advantageous. In a lot of cases, they lose on both ends of it. But a lot of what holds people back is that fear, is that concern that, well, let me take what is comfortable, let me take the easy road or what seems like the easy road, not realizing that what they're actually doing is creating an environment where they can't optimize or maximize their own potential, whether it's professionally or personally.
Yeah. And just occurred to me, I'm wearing my Army sweatshirt. My son's in the military, but the Army has that slogan, "An army of one." And although that can be motivating, it can also be demotivating. Because sometimes people don't want to just be themselves or experience their true power. They want their friends coming on board, cheering them on, and like you said, they want their friends to respect them, to idolize them, to encourage them. And sometimes that's not always possible. We you see these movies. These sports figures come out and their coaches are saying, no personal contact. You know, no relationships, no alcohol, no this, and they want you to be this perfect specimen. The problem is that I think sometimes we rely on outside interference. We do want acceptance from our peers, and sometimes that does drive us. But sometimes it gives us a different reason to keep going. If I stayed this army of one and I never got married, never had kids, would I be motivated to be this entrepreneur that I've been for the last 30 years? Probably not. I wouldn't have had any encouragement. I wouldn't have had a reason to do what I do.
No, I completely agree. I was moved very much to pursue my doctorate because of my wife and my children. And so when I had the commencement ceremony and I finished, completed that process, it was very important to me that they be present, because without them, I don't know that I would have gone on to get a doctorate.
Mhm. No, but you had sports experience. In fact, I think you were in the Olympics.
No, the Olympics, that was the one competition I didn't. Um, I did. I was on the U.S. National team for fencing for 6 years, and I went to the World Championships multiple times, and the Pan American Games, and I qualified for the World University Games. I I medaled at World Cups in individually and also with the U.S. team, and that ended up with me being inducted into the USA Fencing Hall of Fame,
Wow.
class of 2020. Although that induction didn't happen until 2023 because of COVID.
Yeah.
Um, and once again, that was another moment where it was very important to share that with my wife and my children, because I wouldn't have them in my life without the sport of fencing. So, um, my interest in performance initially came from my own struggles as a competitive athlete, and all of the different things I went through on the World Cup circuit for fencing, and particularly in the United States, where fencing is still a niche sport.
Right.
In Europe, it's pretty well known, on the continent, and national team members are recognized out in public in a way that in this country that's not the case. Um, and the top athletes in the sport are training 5 days a week, twice a day, which, because they are treated like professional athletes, they behave like professional athletes in that way, because there is a seriousness of purpose,
Mhm.
which, if you want to be competitive at that level, it can't be well, I train a couple times a week, or, I train when I feel like it, or, oh, I don't feel like training today, so I'm not going to train. That's not going to, get the job done.
Mhm.
It's important to learn to match that. And I trained for 11 years in Paris, which is when I really encountered the highest level of fencing at that time in the 1990s. Um, and it was inspiring and encouraging and really very impressive to me what they were doing in the sport and how they had a pedagogical method and a way of bringing along athletes where when people would retire, there wasn't suddenly a gaping hole on the national team because they had people waiting in the wings to step up and fill those spaces.
Yeah, we talk about competitive nature, and sports, I think, is it's one of those things where you're constantly looking at what your competitors are doing and trying to evaluate and improve yourself. But, when it comes to entrepreneurship, yes, entrepreneurs, I think, look at their competitors. And one of the things I stopped telling people to do was being too concerned with what your competitors are doing, because sometimes they spend too much time trying to analyze what others are doing and they forget about trying to improve their own business. So case in point, sometimes, they'll look at pricing and they'll look at what their competitors are pricing their services at. And I'm thinking, stop doing that. You don't know their true cost of doing business. And now you're just copying a price because you want to be lower. But is that the price that you actually need to stay in business? Or are you just doing it to compete on price? And when it comes to sports, I think that, they look at their moves. They look at, how they flex or do this or do that. And I'm like, okay, it's okay to glance at it and maybe in the back of your mind say, okay, this is what that person did. But to spend hours and hours and hours studying somebody else when they could be improving themselves is blows my mind.
Yeah, that's really important, and I'm glad you brought that up. One of the one of the things which I help a lot of my clients with is the idea of expressing themselves either through their sport or through their creative art.
Mhm.
Um, because 100% correct. I mean, you can be inspired, and you should be if you see someone who is a performing artist who is able to play musical instrument, for example, at a really high level. That's fantastic.
Mhm.
But if you pick up a guitar, don't try and sound like someone else.
Mhm.
Try and find your own sound. If you're an athlete, if you're a competitive athlete, absolutely be inspired, be encouraged
Yeah.
by what other athletes are doing, not just in your own discipline, but in other disciplines as well, because a lot of these sports have more things in common than they have differences.
Mhm.
But what will allow you to attain your highest level, and it's the same thing in business, is figuring out, finding out, really able to identify what makes you unique as an entrepreneur,
Mhm.
as an athlete, as an artist. And that's where you want to really focus your attention, because when you stop trying to be like others and you try and understand what makes you unique and then mine that, it's going to be a lot better for you. It's going to be a lot more comfortable in a way,
Yeah.
because you're not going to try and be like a carbon copy of someone else. I mean, those commercials about trying to be like Mike, right? You just, I mean, if you put on a pair of Air Jordans, you're not going to play basketball like Michael Jordan.
Mhm.
The shoes are totally fine. But that's not going to
Right.
suddenly make you play basketball like that. It's about your own strengths,
Mhm.
which come from the individual
No, and
needs
and
of the individual.
and there are people out there that have a natural tendency to be better. My brother was better at sports than me. He was better at a lot of things than me. Can he write a book to save his life? Probably not. So, I people say, "Well, Rob, aren't you worried about your competitors?" It's like, I have no competitors. I stopped thinking that way a long time ago because nobody does what I do in the manner I do it, you know? And same, nobody does what you do in the manner that you do it. It goes back to that uniqueness and what makes us who we are. And yeah, there are things out there, like you say, the Air Jordans that make you feel more powerful. You put them on and you feel like you could slam dunk something. But I could put Air Jordans on there all day long and I still would be crap at basketball, I'll tell you what. So, embrace your strengths. This is what this show's all about. It's understanding your superpowers. What makes you better than, I'm not saying better than someone else, but what makes you, be inspired by somebody else. Because, out of all these episodes that I've done over the last many, 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 many years, you know, I've always selected people that were different, that had something unique to share.
Mhm.
And so when I bring people on board, as a guest, my audience is wants to know, hey, what makes this guy special, or what makes that girl, unique in what they do, and they want to learn. And I think that's how we all perform better.
I can't argue with anything you just said. I think, I mean, it's interesting you brought up competition. Even though fencing is a very competitive sport, I stopped seeing my opponents as my opposition,
Hmm.
and I really felt that um, the only person I ever needed really to compete with was myself, in terms of myself in the present versus myself in the past versus myself in the future.
Hmm.
Which, where do I want to be? Which direction do I want to go in? Um, and I certainly, wanted to really put all of my chips on myself in that way. And I felt when I was competing at my highest level that as long as I could think, I could find a way to be effective.
Hmm. Yeah. We mentioned Jonathan Thompson early on in this episode, and I want to get into your sideline projects because you are like me. You like to write, and now you don't write business books, but you do write adventurous stuff. And I want the audience to understand that, as an entrepreneur, we're not stuck in one routine every day. I coach people. I help them with their marketing. I design their copywriting. I help them with books. I do a lot of things, and that's what makes me happy. With you, like I said, you have this. You wrote a script, and I think a book too, and let's talk about that.
Sure. Well, um, I was always very creative. Creativity was a big part of my life from the time that I was very young. Um, and when I was a child, my father used to tell me bedtime stories that he created. And maybe about 10 years ago, I asked if he could give me a document giving me the rights to those stories. And he asked why I wanted that. I said, well, maybe I'll do something with that one day. And even at that time, it wasn't clear at all in my mind. Um, and in early 2020, he passed away, having been in failing health for a number of years. And that was right before the first COVID shutdown. So I had extra time on my hands and grief to process. Um, and I got it in my head. I'm going to write a screenplay for an animated Disney movie.
Hmm.
So in I in the month of February of 2020, I sat down and I was still doing my day job of being a sport and performance psychologist, but I wrote the first draft of the screenplay based on some of the stories my father told me, but more stories that I had told my own children because when they were much younger, I invented stories for them, and that was a lot of fun for all of us. So so I finished that first screenplay, and that was great. I really enjoyed that process, and it was very cathartic for me. And I finished it, and I thought, okay, so now what do I do with this? And I went on LinkedIn and I found an art director, Matthew Cunningham, really great. I shared the screenplay with him, and he enjoyed it also, and he suggested that I should turn it into a children's book, so that the art style, the kind of visual stylings that I had in mind, would be very easy then to see um, when I then try and present this to studios or producers or anybody who might want to get involved with this. So he helped me find two artists to do the illustrations. And so in late 2021, I self published the children's book. So then I had the children's book and a screenplay, and I thought, well, now what? And so I went back on LinkedIn, and that's how I came across Jonathan Thompson, who's been really very helpful and very supportive throughout this whole process. And in the meantime, I wrote two more screenplays. So I have a true animated trilogy with a lot of different characters and all taking place in this fictional world that I came up with. Um, and now I'm trying to get these things developed and see where we go from there.
And I want the audience to realize that, just because we are sometimes dynamic entrepreneurs, we also need to have an outlet. My outlet is writing. It provides me with therapy. It keeps me grounded, and it doesn't allow my ADHD to, you know, go all over the place. And I think you being this performance coach, you also are using this as your outlet. Like you said, it's cathartic, and it keeps you grounded, and it allows you to take some of the maybe the frustrations or the aggravations or the inspirations that you get daily and put them into something that you think is going to help somebody down the road.
Well, it's interesting because when I was an athlete, I was very creative with my approach to my sport, with the different tactics that I came up with, the different game plans that I came up with. My brain was always working very quickly,
Mm.
and sometimes a little too much. But I found, and I still find, as a psychotherapist, as a psychologist, this in my sessions, there's a lot of creativity. There's a lot of that aspect as well that I find through my chosen profession. So for me, when it comes to these fictional endeavors, it's just more. I mean, it may seem like it's totally unrelated to these other areas of my life. To me, it's maybe not a straight line, but it's very cohesive. It's very coherent to me because it's whether you're creating in one area or creating in another, you're still creating.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that outlet has been very interesting to me, and very fulfilling in a
Mhm.
lot of ways. And
Yeah, we
I really enjoy the creative process, and especially the fact that everything that I've created, those different screenplays, some of the other things that I've also been working on, it's been a different experience every single time.
mhm. Yeah, and we go back to this theme of realizing your potential or exceeding your goals, and being a writer, being an author, for me, has helped elevate me to this different level where people look up to me differently. You know, if I was just a coach, I was just this guy helping them with more marketing, it'd be one thing, but now they're like, "Wow, Rob, you've written all these books. Can I hire you to do this? Can I, you know, uh, whatever the thing that but it just it's now getting me to do things that I'm like, wow, I don't think I've ever would have ever had this opportunity if I didn't write books. And so I'm not saying writing a book is that answer for everyone, but for me, being a creative, it's elevated me to a different status that I'm not always used to because I don't want to have this, even though this is called e-heroes, and I want people to see that the hero quality of people. Sometimes I don't wanna be that superhero, it's like, "Dude, I just wanna be Clark Kent sometimes," Can
Mhm.
and writing a book allows me to be normal again. Even though writing is going to take it take this book somewhere, and people are gonna say, "Wow, that was great, Rob, I love it." Now I'm back to that superhero again. So it's this constant push and pull. Um, and maybe I'm just messed up.
No, well,
But
no, I think human beings, I mean, we are creative creatures by nature in different ways, and it doesn't have to be through sport, it doesn't have to be through the arts or through writing or through music. It could be in the kitchen if you're creating something. It literally could be almost anything
mhm,
where you're using your imagination to try and either solve a problem or make something a little bit
but,
better or you
one
know
of the things though, one of the things that I think has helped me a lot is as being an author and as getting out there and meeting new people, I'm no longer an introvert. Although, you know, had you asked me 10 years ago, "Oh, Rob, yeah, you're definitely an introvert." I still don't like crowds, but I'm more accepting of them. Um, and these podcasts become more animated. I have more confidence. I can go out and speak in front of public, in public to large crowds, which, had I not written those books, I probably wouldn't have done all that. So I think as we grow as an entrepreneur, as we grow into this uh, different version of ourselves, you know, we have to be accepting of the consequences that come with it. It's like, with great power comes what I call great opportunity, because there's always going to be something that comes along, and are you going to accept it or are you going to reject it? And the more confidence I get from either writing books or doing podcasts or getting out there and meeting people, um, that those crowds don't bother me like they used to.
yeah, I think what I've really experienced, and particularly I would say over the past couple of years, maybe I've become a little more aware of it, a little more conscious of it. um you never know what is going to lead to what,
Hmm.
and a chance meeting may completely change your life, uh, whether it's personally or professionally, and different opportunities will present themselves based on the choices that you make.
Hmm.
And that's why I think it's very important to learn to pay attention to the choices that you make,
Hmm.
because one choice will cause some opportunities to present themselves. A different choice will make those opportunities not possible at that time. So there are a lot of different things. There are a lot of different things, and I think it's helpful to be aware and really cultivate that level of awareness.
Yeah. So how do people find you? Where do they go?
Um, you can find me on LinkedIn, Justin Tausig, or you can find me on my website, myinnervision.com.
And if you're an athlete or someone that wants to improve their performance, what can they expect? I mean, I know it's not. I think people we're in this instant gratification thing where they just turn on the internet and they get all their news right away. But performance is different, and I think sometimes people forget that it's the long game. But they expect instant results. And so you try to tell people, like, look, I've been an entrepreneur for 30 years. My overnight success took a long time.
Yeah, I think what you can expect certainly, and I mentioned this during the initial consultation, is that it isn't a recipe. As I said earlier on, I don't fix people. It's not, a 6-week program or something else. There are athletes I've worked with. There are performing artists I've worked with for just a few months.
Hmm.
There are some I have worked with for a number of years because there's always tweaking. There are always things that come up
Hmm.
within their chosen profession, within their chosen activity, in their personal lives as well. There are a lot of different elements to this.
Hmm.
So it really comes down to, and what I offer more than anything else is the opportunity of for growth,
Hmm.
for that self-awareness piece. Um, I don't always have the answers. I'm not, the wise man sitting on a mountaintop that dispenses wisdom. I don't always have the right answers. I can sometimes ask some of the right questions.
Hmm. And I think that's what it requires is that and not only you asking the right questions, but your client delivering the right answers.
For
Sometimes
them.
they're not even sure what they're supposed to say.
Mhm.
And I think that's the problem today is that we are um, bombarded with so much information, so much disinformation that all we want to do is argue with the coach. And sometimes that's the wrong thing. The coach is there to help guide you. And if you're constantly arguing, you're never going to have the success that you want.
Well, I think, conflict can lead to some places, but I think conflict is only going to take you so far, whether it's conflict externally with other people or, more importantly, internal conflict.
Hmm.
I think it's important to understand what you are trying to achieve with a particular action or a particular decision, particular choice, and then see where things can go from there.
Hmm.
If the choices you are making just lead you down a dead end, but you insist on continuing to make them, that's your choice
Right.
in that instance too.
And not everything that we do in life is a Hollywood story. Hollywood is taking a lot of these stories and glamorizing them and short shortchanging them into these 90-minute movies that, you know, what you're not seeing is all the hard work, the blood, sweat, tears, the aggravation of being an entrepreneur. I've been in the trenches. I've gotten kicked in the jimmies and thrown down and ripped off and people are like, "Well, Rob, that's how do you continue to do what you do?" And I'm like, because I know at the end of what I'm doing, there's a bright light that's guiding me to say, "Hey, look, your potential is out there. Just keep going." You know, and that's been pushing me for the last 30 years. And there are years where I make lots of money. There are years where I don't. You know, that is entrepreneurial life.
Mhm.
And some people are like, "Oh, that sucks. I'm gonna go work for someone else." But the thing is that I did that in the early 90s. I worked for a lot of places, got laid off, got fired. I was the number one salesperson for this One place wasn't good enough. I got fired. As as an entrepreneur, I call the shots, you know, and everything is on me. And I know that that's for a lot of people that's too much. They'd rather go work for someone else, but you can get fired just or laid off. People in the government right now, they think their jobs are cushy. They're getting massively laid off.
Mhm.
So, nothing is guaranteed, but if you strive to be the best, whether it be you're an athlete or an entrepreneur, keep going. You get tossed down, get yourself back up.
Mhm.
Keep going. So, any last words of advice to the audience?
Figure out who you are. Figure out what makes you tick. Figure out what motivates you, what drives you, because in that knowledge lies your own ability, your own path to whatever defines you uniquely.
Mhm. And there you go, folks. This is what makes Dr. Tausig an e-hero, and we will see you guys on the next episode. Adios.